Thank you for your song, Happy Charlie. Okay. Next up, we have a lineup of people who have a few words to say about Dr. John and Betsy Buddha. To start us off would be Carolyn Kingshill, former missionary to Thailand.
I'm here! Many of you know me. Well, tough. That's not fun. Yeah, that's better. I've been around here at Westminster Gardens occasionally, but I'm really at Pilgrim Place out in Claremont. Do you know Pilgrim Place? Yes. Good. So we know each other. That's fine. And it's good that today we have a couple of our children here. We have Janet and Zena Kingshill, and we have Yumi Kim. They were all in school together many years ago now. And actually, these two were in school together from kindergarten on up. And Janet's brother Jim and Zena's brother Kim, I think were also in school together some. And they were real ducklings, I can tell you that. Whether or not their sisters would agree with that or not today, I'm not sure. And they were at the Chiang Mai Children's Center. How many of you remember the Chiang Mai Children's Center? Well, 2 or 3 or 4 people do. That's good. And they went to junior high and to high school, either in Chiang Mai or in Bangkok. And John and Betsy, well, Betsy was always teaching science in one of the schools while John was working in the hospital. And Conrad Kingshill was always teaching in one of the schools like PRC, I see some people nodding, or Bangkok Christian College. And I was involved with various music kinds of things. Some of you may remember that, whether you remember it as something that was good or something that was not so good. Your ears would tell you so. And now we have some of these people with us here today. You know, we have Janet, we have Zena, and we have Yumi back there, and we have Garoon back there from Bangkok Christian College, and I'm sure some more people, not to mention the fact that we have Tom and Gail Duggan, who also were later on teaching in some of these same schools. So that's what we were then, and this is what we are now. So that's it. Thank you, and goodbye.
Hi, I'm Tony Osimo, and for the last 16 years I've had the privilege of being the pastor at the First Presbyterian Church where John and Betsy were members. Ironically, I first met John at First High. He was there receiving an award about 17 years ago, and I was coming before I even joined the Presbytery up here. And I remember thinking, John was the tallest doctor I had ever met in my life. And for 16 years, I still wonder how he worked on people, because he was about 18 feet above them before he could reach down. But the two of them were very special to the life of our church, and to me especially. John and Betsy showed what it is to model to be Christ-like. After serving an entire lifetime, pretty much, in the mission field, they came in and were as equally active in the life of First Presbyterian Church. Betsy was a deacon, and I remember her. They were always the studious ones of our church, and they were always the ones organizing things. So Betsy was always very careful about the parish list and who was what, and if somebody moved, it was a life or death thing, whether to make sure they were in the right parish. And John was on session with me, and it was both good and bad, because sometimes we have discussions about the budget that could go an extra hour because John was so meticulous, but nothing ever got by him. And I was very grateful for his ability to spot things that maybe we didn't see, and they were both just a wonderful model of servant leadership in the church. I got to know John even better because he was part of the Bible study that I taught for several years that meets Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. And at first, he would come in, and John was always good for one question. He would sit and take it in. He always had a very serious look. And that made me nervous, because I didn't know, was he just listening or was he not agreeing? But then he'd ask a profound question. I realized, oh yes, he is tracking with all of us, and he doesn't think I'm a heretic. And we'd have a great time in Bible study. But the thing that always surprised me about John is he'd have a very serious look, and I think he'd be very mad, and then he would just bust out laughing. He didn't do that often, but when John laughed, it was the most joyful belly guffaw that I'd ever seen, and his 18-foot arms would go up in the air, and he would just laugh. And all of us would laugh. We didn't even know what the joke would be, but we would laugh because John was laughing, and it was just so fun to participate with him and watch him in that. As their health became an issue and mobility really became an issue, it was a little harder watching these amazing people not be able to get to everything and how that frustrated them. And so it was really a privilege for myself and some of my staff as I bring them along. And once a month we would bring communion into their rooms. And I remember as John transitioned from being able to walk with a walker and then eventually having to be in a wheelchair, he was very proud of the fact that he could still push himself around, but it would take about 10 minutes to go from his room upstairs down to Betsy's room below before they could be together. And after a while I said, John, do you think it would be okay if I pushed you down there? And he actually thought about it for a minute, and he finally said, yes, I think that would be okay. And then from then on, I would push him, and then it got to the point where I would do rounds with him, because he realized, hey, he's got a chauffeur now. So we would go to different rooms to visit people and call on people, very much the doctor still checking up on people, how they were, and then we'd eventually make it down into Betsy's room. And then we'd have conversation, and John loved to talk about his childhood in Portland. And a few years ago, when Ann and I, my wife Ann and I, were driving up through Oregon, he told me a few places to make sure to go check out, including the church, the Presbyterian church where he grew up, and it was a joy to see his town. So coming back, when I was telling him how Portland's probably changed quite a bit since he had been there, he just thought it was a completely different city. But I got to see the places where he grew up, and it was a joy to relay that back to him. But it was wonderful to be able to stay in touch to the very end with communion. And that was something that was always so important to he and to Betsy, to come and spend some time with them, to share communion together, and to bring the elements from the sanctuary when it got to the point where they could no longer make it to church as a couple. But John was always very faithful. And if he could not make it, usually because the public transportation forgot to pick him up or the route had changed, he would always call me. And I'll share this one last story. I was in the middle of a sermon, and I usually preach from an iPad that's connected to my phone. And in the middle of my sermon, it froze up. I thought, oh no, it was just panicking because it had all my notes. And then this little message popped down, Dr. John Guyer. He was basically telling me that the service that picks him up would not be able to come, and so he was sorry he was missing. He didn't realize he was actually freezing my sermon for about 60 seconds. But when I told him, he was aghast, and he said, don't worry about it, that was my fault for not turning it off. But they were a wonderful couple, and we will greatly miss them. But again, they were a couple that really showed what it meant to be servant leaders in everything they did. And we already miss them greatly, but I'm so